Welcome to the Genuine Life podcast, where we take time to dive deep into conversations, stories, and teachings to help lead people to multiply genuine life in Christ in Greater Austin and beyond.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Genuine Life podcast, where we're taking conversations and stories and really looking at what it means to cultivate a genuine life in Christ. And today I'm so excited to have our pastor of discipleship here, Scott DeSanders. Scott, so good to have you on the podcast today, and really excited about the conversation that we're going to have, because we both know that here at Parkway, our passion is to see every man, woman, and child reach with the gospel of Jesus Christ here in Greater Austin and beyond. That this is a worldwide vision that Jesus has that we share in. And here recently at Parkway, we've actually just gone through a series, and we've called it the B.L.E.S.S series, where we've been learning 5 practical ways that we can be involved in people's lives, loving them, and it really brings about a change in the world, that there's a real gospel change that can happen. And I'm so excited to have you here today to talk about it, because you've really helped lead our church through this process and are continuing to equip disciples and life groups and our staff and our elders with how do we live this missional lifestyle. And that's so important to us, because here even we have a dream, a vision of 2030 of seeing 300 everyday missionaries, 30 missional communities, and 3 church plants. And so learning how to live this missional blessed lifestyle is so important to us. And so just to kind of get us started and help people kind of hear a little bit about what this means, could you just give us a little walkthrough of what this B.L.E.S.S acronym actually stands for?
Totally. Yeah, it is really big for us, because it's just challenging. If we don't have really a plan, a strategy, if we think that I'm just going to go out there and be missional whenever it happens, whenever it comes up, most of us tend to just lean back into living our lives comfortably. And so what B.L.E.S.S does for us is it gives us some handles to put on, ways to be intentional. When we really do understand that God's inviting all of us to be on mission. This isn't just something for the technical pastors. It's not something just for career missionaries, but that really every single one of us can be on mission right where we live and the people that God has around us. So yeah, this B.L.E.S.S acronym is real simple. It just gives us a way to put this into practice. With B is begin with prayer. We'll talk about that in a minute. L is to listen with care, to listen to people. E stands for eating together, coming together over a meal. And the first S has to do with serving somebody else, or even serving one another, letting them serve us. And then the final S is to share your story and also God's story when the moment arises, when there's time for that. And sometimes I think of this is not an ordered set of steps, even though begin with prayer is a really good starting point, and it sounds like, and it's true, you should start there. The rest of them can come in any order. So sometimes I think of this as, it's like a constellation, right? Yeah. Isn't that a cool image? Yeah. Just like you could draw the lines between the stars in any form. Here, I might begin with prayer, and God might immediately have me with an opportunity to serve somebody. Or I could share my story over a meal and then practice listening to them really well while we're there. So it's just 5 ways that we can practice being missional right where we live.
Yeah, I love that. And I think sometimes when we think about evangelism or sharing our faith, there can be this fear that rises up in all of us, and even a stigma for how we go about it or how it's received by others, because it can come across confrontational, or people can feel like they're being bullied. But when I think about these 5 practices, man, it's something that every single person can be a part of, and that there's really an avenue for everyone to get involved in living this genuine life that Jesus has called us to with the gospel. And so I love that so much. And I wonder if maybe we could just talk through some examples of what does this look like in our daily lives and people here at Parkway, and how have we seen it make an impact? So maybe let's just start with that first one and begin with prayer. And how have you seen this played out in someone's life and the impact that it's had?
Yeah, that begin with prayer step is so foundational. Sometimes I even think it's not disconnected from all the others. It flows all the way through the rest of these, and it undergirds all of them. So I should start with prayer if I'm doing nothing, just because I can pray no matter what my circumstances are. Even some of the people that I know that are across the country, or I'm not in regular communication with them, I can still pray for them, even if I can't call them up tomorrow or something. So yeah, prayer is just, we're asking God to change their life. We're asking God to move in their heart and create in them like a desire to know more about Jesus, or a desire to care more about spiritual things, to recognize their need for God in their life. So that's often what I'm praying for people. And we can pray for people at any cross section of life. So I might be praying for people in my family, or some of my neighbors, or coworkers in the office place. If you're a student, you could be praying for teachers, classmates. There's just a wide array and network of people we could be praying for. And one of the tools we talk about here at Parkway that a lot of us use is a website called Bless Every Home. And you can just look it up at blesseveryhome.com. We're already on there as a church network. And what that website does is it shows you people that are already naturally around you, and then it delivers, like almost on a silver platter, it delivers names that you can pray for by name every day, or you can set it through the settings to be every other day or once a week. Whatever is a natural rhythm for you to be praying for people and just asking, God, would you change their life? Would you bring them into the knowledge of Jesus? And so that's something that I've been using. In fact, in my neighborhood, we've lived in our house for a little over a year. And so I've been praying for these names over and over and over again. And earlier this month on Halloween, it was cool because while I was out with my kids walking around and seeing a lot of other neighbors and just introducing and saying hi, I seriously met multiple people that I already knew by name, and I'd been praying for them for months. And that was really cool to put a face with a name. And it's not like I made it awkward and I was like, oh, hey, I've been praying for you for a long time, but I just knew them by name. It meant something to my heart. Yeah. And now I've got a face to think of when I pray for them, or I know which house they are. I've seen their family, and now I can pray for them more specifically. So
that's so good. I wonder, for people who are maybe like, man, how do I incorporate that into my daily practice? Yeah. I wonder if there aren't even some tips that you can talk about of maybe sending reminders or cues throughout the day, like, because it can be so easy to get in the middle of the busyness of your day and just even forget about it.
Well, that's one thing that I like about the Bless Every Home website. That app is going to send you stuff at the start of the day that you ask for it. And so I get that in my inbox before I even commute to work. So oftentimes I'll bring that up and have those names in front of me on my commute, safely, of course, but it gives me the chance to pray for them while I'm driving. Yeah. But I know other folks that will set a reminder at a specific time of the day that they'll say, hey, at 10:30, I want to pray for my grandma every day. And then afterwards, I'm going to send her a text and let her know that I prayed for her. Or you might just write a note to yourself, like, this is the time of day where I pray for this, and I'm going to put it on my mirror at home. Just anything that will help trigger and prompt you and remind you of this. But I often also tell people, keep it manageable. Like, the last thing you want to do is to commit to, like, I'm going to pray for 100 names every hour, because of course you're not going to keep up with that. Yeah. So keep it at a manageable amount that you can actually follow through with.
Yeah, that's so good. I know even for me personally, something that I used to do when I'd wake up in the morning, the very first thing I would do would be to look at social media. Yeah. And it would get me distracted. Right. I would just be distracted for the start of my day. And for me, one of the things I've started to do is the first thing I do when I wake up is I open that email and immediately start to pray for the names that pop up. Mm-hmm. And it totally reorients my day around prayer and being kingdom focused, which has been so helpful.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
So the second piece of bless would be listen with care. And that's a big one, because just as human beings, sometimes we're not the best at conversations, and these days technology, some of its impact on us makes it sometimes hard to have organic and natural conversations with another person, especially as we're getting to know them, without sometimes bringing an agenda. And that's probably the biggest way we could mess this up, is if we're trying to bless somebody, if we bring an agenda and turn them into a project. Yeah. Because I've got to really push the gospel on them, or I've got to strong arm this conversation to fit my agenda of getting it towards the truth of the gospel. Of course, I would love it to get there. But if I've got potential future conversations with somebody, the best thing I can do is to learn to be a really good listener, to show them that I care about them as a person. You know, a good conversation should be like a tennis match or a ping pong match. It should go back and forth. It shouldn't be me just trying to tell them all about myself and then in an awkward, stilted way be like, do you know Jesus? Like that's going to turn people off. So it should be more organic. There should be curiosity on my part about another person. And I know you've practiced this a lot in the people around you in your neighborhood. So do you have a good example for us of how you've gotten to know somebody by becoming a good listener with them?
Yeah. You know, I think one of the things that we see even within our culture, our society, is that we've actually lost the art of question asking and listening. And not listening so that you can be prepared to say the next thing, but genuinely listening to people because you actually care about them. And it's been amazing at how social media has created these echo chambers of let me express my opinion, like you were saying, and I want to get my point across. And we've just lost this ability. And I know for us as a family, and by no means are we perfect at this, but one small thing that's been so helpful for us, even in our neighborhood, is when we go outside and just play as a family. So rather than spending time on video games, a lot of times we'll say, hey, let's go outside and play. And instead of playing in the backyard, we say, let's play in the front yard. Let's play out front because then we're going to get to see our neighbors. We're going to naturally rub shoulders and come into conversations. And it's been amazing, literally amazing, just being in the front yard and the conversations that have come from that. And then one of the things that I always say when it comes to engaging people is it's that learning to be interested rather than interesting. Ooh, yeah. That so often when we talk to people, it's really, we're just talking about ourselves or finding ways that we can be interesting to others rather than taking the time to actually care about the other person, asking about their family, asking about their work, asking about even some of their hobbies, the things that they're interested about. And as you get to know what they're interested about, it really paves a pathway. It gets an avenue into their heart of what is it that they really care about? What is it that they're worried or anxious about? What is it that they're afraid of? And then when you're able to get to know that piece of them, one, it helps you know how to pray. But then through that, there are opportunities that come to be able to share the gospel that I know we're going to get to here in a moment. But I know even in my own neighborhood, just that simple example of getting to be outside, playing in the front yard, and then when you see a neighbor, go and begin to ask questions about them, and then just listen, listen, and be curious. And so I know for us, that's just been so cool to see relationships that have developed by those two things right there.
And you can ask follow-up questions while you're listening to somebody because you're not thinking about other things. And the next time you meet with them, you can bring the stuff up that they said the previous time.
Exactly
you can ask them, how's it going with your in-laws? And how are those things that are happening at your school, in your kid's classroom, or whatever y'all talked about? So that's really good.
Yeah, no, it's just such an important practice. And I think something for all of us that we need to work on because the society that we live in has lost the art of question asking and listening. But when you do it and do it well, people feel cared and loved when you are able to do that.
And you know, even if in the one conversation that's in the moment, you don't get to spiritual things or the gospel itself, if something happens in that person's life and they've built some trust with you, then you may be the person that they're going to call up or send a text to because you've built that trust and they know that you care about them and that you've listened to them. And then you might be paving the way for future conversations.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think so often too, when we take time to listen, it does really open up other opportunities. And that really kind of leads us to the next one of eating. And I wonder if you could maybe just share with us a little bit about what that next step can look like.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes we're talking out in the driveway or when we take our trash can out or we're calling up a long lost friend or distant family member. But a lot of times if we have the opportunity to just get over a meal or over a coffee table over at Starbucks with somebody, that just can take down someone's walls of defenses, make someone more comfortable, just set the stage for better conversations. And ultimately, the reason this is a really good step in the B.L.E.S.S strategy is our Savior did it himself. Jesus so often connected with people over meals, over food analogies that he uses. And it's just a really good principle for us. So there's nothing magic to it. It's just as simple as it sounds. Is there a way that you can connect over a meal to eat together? I'll say my next door neighbor, and as I said, we've lived there for about a year, and I've been trying to pursue just getting to know him more and more. I really like the guy. I think we've got a good camaraderie, but I've been asking, can we get some time over a meal or over coffee sometime? And I'll say there's seasons where I've let the ball drop, and it's sometimes hard to actually get a date on the calendar. And so even that's reminding me right now, I need to follow up with him and make sure that we can pick a date and make it happen. But I can tell that if I can get some extended time that's not in the driveway, but over at the coffee shop with him, we're going to be able to take things even further and get to know each other better.
Yeah, and I love that too, because when you think about sharing a meal, it's something we do every single day,
All
and
the
for a lot of
time.
us, 3 times a day. So
Yes.
that means 3 to 7, that's 21 different meals throughout the week. And what would it look like just to say, hey, what if I took one of those?
One.
What if I took one of those and shared that with someone else to get to know someone and care about them? Man, what an easy way to think about your week of how you could potentially do that and really build bridges with someone else and break down barriers to be able to develop a relationship. I think that is such a good principle. And so often I think we lose that because we get so busy in life and we think we have to add all these other things. But what if, man, loving people and caring for people and ultimately blessing people was in the everyday of our natural life, something that we're already doing? That's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, how about, when we think about getting over a meal, but then what about when it comes to serving other people? Because that's a huge part of what Jesus modeled for us, but it also has an incredible impact on people's lives. Maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's similar to some of these others because it builds trust and it builds connection with folks. But if we can see a practical need that we can fulfill in their life, like that just helps us to grow more connected, and it sparks us towards better conversations or more opportunities to share with them. So, as an example, in our old neighborhood, our next door neighbors there, our fence was getting old and they really wanted to help build the new fence. And so that's not in our skill set to go out and build it. But what was possible for us was to spend time with them while they were out there working, and we could help them. And one day we got pizza for all of us and we shared it while they were working on the fence. And it was just a cool opportunity where they felt like they were able to help us and we were helping them through our own abilities to do so. And it just connected us better. And it's no surprise that after that point, we felt a different level of comfort with each other. And so we were able to more easily have conversations. Right now, the next door neighbor I talked about that I'm trying to get time over coffee, I'm striking out so far on the time together like that, but we do have a plan because I'm not a very handy guy that he's seen some ways that he can help us with our exterior lights. And so what we do have is a plan where he's going to come and help me install those. And so that's a way that it's not even me serving him. He wants to help serve me, but even in me saying yes to that and receiving some help, it gives him dignity. And so it's not just me, reaching down to help him. I'm letting him help me back. And I know it's going to pave the way to solidify the relationship even more.
I think that's so good. I think let's even hit the pause button on that for a second, because you've told me before that when it comes to being handy, that maybe that's not your forte and that
Not the
sometimes
best.
you need a little bit of help. But I know, like, when you think about a moment like that, it can be hard to actually ask for help. But maybe just talk about that for a second, because I think sometimes we feel like in service, we need to be the ones who are doing the serving.
Right.
But what about people like having an opportunity where we actually need help and humble ourselves and the impact that can actually have?
Yeah. It is really easy sometimes for us to see what our neighbors need. They need help with this. They need help with that. And even sometimes we're assuming that. We don't always know that for sure. But there's obvious cases like we could help them take care of their kids, give them a date night out, or help them with something in their house or in their yard if maybe they're unable to do some things. But the more we can keep an equal playing field, that's why I said giving them dignity, because when we're only always helping someone else, it kind of creates that type of relationship where I'm the giver and they're the recipient. And then when we bring it into things of the gospel, sometimes that just gives people layers of like, that just feels weird because you're always helping me. But if we keep it more even and more of an equal relationship, then when I'm ready to share, like, this is something that means a lot in my life. This is the Savior that I've found that's changed me eternally, like that creates a little bit more like we're on an even playing field. And so that other person may be a little more able to receive that and talk about that.
Yeah, no, that's so good. That's so good. And I think, too, one of the things I love about when you look at the scriptures and you look at Jesus's life and you look at begin with prayer, listen with care, eat with others, and then serving, like you see him practicing all of those things throughout the Gospels. Like this isn't just something that someone made up, but he's actually living this out. You see this in the Gospels. But then ultimately, as Jesus is meeting people's physical and emotional needs, he does ultimately get to people's deeper spiritual need. Yeah. And that kind of brings us to the last S of being able to share your story. And so, man, let's just talk about that for a second. How have you seen that played out? And maybe what are some examples of how we get to that deeper spiritual need in people's lives?
Yeah, I think that a lot of these other pieces of the B.L.E.S.S acronym can sometimes surface if somebody can finally get to the place where they recognize I don't have it all together. Like I am not completely self-sufficient. Maybe there's need in my life for a Savior. We need to be ready in moments like that to share what has made the biggest impact in our own lives. You know, all of these other pieces are just sharing our life with somebody. Mm-hmm. But when we can verbally use our words to share the reason we have hope, the reason we have joy, the reason we can not be anxious and fearful about the state of the world around us, it's time for that. And so sometimes you'll hear me say this final S is share your story and share God's story.
Yeah, that's good.
And so the first half of that is what's made a difference in your life. Sometimes we call that our testimony. It's saying, you know, this is what my life has been like before I understood who Jesus was and before he made the ultimate difference to me. And this is what I learned about Christ and that he went to the cross and that he paid the penalty for my sins. And what did I hear and understand in my heart that made the difference? And what's that looked like afterwards? How has it made my life different? And where do I now have hope, as I was just saying? And then the other half of that is share God's story. And sometimes that just means sharing the bigger picture of who God is and that he loves you and maybe that he created humanity. He created us out of love and because he desired a relationship of intimacy with us and how that was lost because of our rebellion and sin all the way back to the beginning in Genesis 3. And then looking to the cross, what happened when God sent his son to live this perfect life, but then die a death that we couldn't have done to pay for our own sins? So sharing the bigger picture of what God did, of course, culminating in the resurrection from the dead and the fact that Jesus defeated death. So even death isn't an end point for us anymore. We have hope beyond this life and hope of an eternity with Christ in heaven. That's something that we should be ready to share. One tool that I've heard recently is called a micro testimony, and it's taking all of this and boiling it down really small, because sometimes you just have a short little moment with somebody. And a micro testimony is just along the lines of saying, you know, I'm feeling this in my life right now, and sharing something vulnerable like, hey, I'm feeling anxious about some factors that are happening in my family or the finances of our life, or whatever it is that you're going to share with some transparency. And then immediately going to, but I know God tells me this, and maybe you say a passage of scripture that gives you encouragement or that you've looked at recently that's helped with this. And as a result of that, now I know, and now I have confidence that it's going to be like that. So, for example, recently with my own father, I was able to share this. I was able to say, like, you know, raising our kids is difficult, and sometimes I worry that I'm being too hard on my boys, and it's stressful to imagine like how to parent well without messing our kids up. But I know that I've read in Ephesians lately about being a good parent and what it looks like to not exasperate your kids, but to love them and to love them with self-sacrifice. And so now I feel even more confident and committed that God's got this. He's got it in his hands, and he's helping empower me to be the best dad possible. And so in a short little conversation, I was able to share with my dad something that's hard and where God gives me the answer to it, and then how that helps reinforce me moving forward. That's a great way of sharing my story and God's story together in a succinct fashion.
Yeah, no, that's so good. And it's such a practical way to do it. And it's natural. It doesn't feel forced. It's part of everyday life. And I think, again, that's the beauty of what we're talking about here, that when we think about these 5 missional practices, it's something that you incorporate into the everyday of your life, and that anyone, any follower of Jesus can really put this into practice. And I think, too, this last point is so important because, I think this has been attributed to Augustine saying, and I don't know that it was actually him, but that whole adage of, share the gospel always, and if necessary, use words. And I really don't like that, because that's really not what Scripture calls us to. It's not what Jesus calls us to. We're to love people and share the good news of the gospel with our mouth, with words, and that we're called to do that and to do it all together, to not eliminate any of it. It's with our actions and with our words. And that's really what B.L.E.S.S is getting at, which I think is so, so good.
I agree.
Yeah, no, Scott, this is such a good conversation. I wonder, right now I'm imagining someone who's driving down the highway right now, or they're out for a run, or they're going for a walk. And I'm just starting to wonder, what would be, if we could give them one thing to really land the plane on, or hey, if I could just take one thing from this conversation, what would be maybe the one thing you'd want them to take away from today?
Yeah, I would say we're really prayerfully inviting people from Parkway, or our friends, our neighbors, even people that are listening from far else, to just consider joining with us intentionally on this. You referred earlier to what we're calling everyday missionaries. And this is just people that are living on mission right where you are, in your neighborhood, in your community, in your workplace. And we're just asking, would you consider joining us with this? It doesn't take extra skills. It doesn't take a whole lot of training. You don't need a degree or a special commissioning for this. We're just inviting you to lock arms with us and put this into practice in your own life. And we're finding there's a lot of folks in our community that are doing this really well. Yeah. I was talking with a couple that comes to Parkway recently, and just them hearing about this B.L.E.S.S stuff, all of these steps, they've started to really practice this in their neighborhoods. They've started on Thursday nights, a group of people meeting in the cul-de-sac and just having some snacks and beverages together and getting to know each other, but they're doing it every week, and they've started to really put this in practice, to be intentional. Even one of our staffers, Grant, and I, we were talking about this earlier, and so let's just even take a minute and listen back to some of that conversation right now if we can. Hey, Grant, I know that putting B.L.E.S.S into practice for you and your wife is something you guys have really worked on together. So
yeah, for sure.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So I moved to Texas about 5 years ago, and part of what the Lord was doing there was helping us become more uncomfortable and stretching us. And okay, we need to be more bold in sharing our faith. And what does that look like? But that can be kind of intimidating and overwhelming, thinking okay, I've got to go from 0 to 100 somehow with interacting with somebody, and all of a sudden trying to figure out a way to share the gospel with them. Yeah. So B.L.E.S.S has just been one of the most effective, practical things I've ever worked with, that just feels real okay, I can do this. I can start to build a relationship with somebody in my life and my circles of influence and get to a spot where the Lord could open up the door for the gospel. So it's been real practical for us, and we've loved it. Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, tell us some ways that maybe you've seen God open doors for you guys in recent months.
Yeah. For sure. It's pretty amazing. I feel over the last few years, we've really been intentional about trying to build relationship with our neighbors specifically around us, and getting to know them, and having driveway interactions and across the street interactions, and helping each other out with projects and all that kind of stuff. So there's been this slow build of trust and relationship. But then just a couple months ago, I remember Sarah and I were on a walk, and we were both feeling individually convicted, just okay, we haven't been really being super intentional about these relationships with our neighbors. So I remember we were on a walk, and we were just talking about, okay, we need to kind of take some big steps forward in intentionality. So I just remember just afresh, I started to really pray for them by name every day. And it was crazy, how the Lord answers prayers. And within a week, all of a sudden, I'm mowing the lawn, and I hear my neighbor shouting over the fence to me, and we start talking, and he wants to have more conversations about spiritual things that we had kind of over the years begun to talk about. So suddenly I'm in his living room a couple nights later, and we're talking for 3 hours about life and morality and his background, and very organically just was able to, through that, get to share like the whole gospel with him, and it was pretty wild. So
like in the conversation, you got to literally share the gospel with this guy?
yeah, it was super cool, pretty wild. And again, like I didn't feel like I had to have a great conversation with him, and then at the very last second, like slide in a sales pitch for Jesus. Like it just was this awesome conversation, and very naturally I was able to like, as part of my story, like get to share who Jesus is and the gospel, and it was pretty awesome.
Well, that's pretty incredible.
Pretty awesome.
What about after that? Has God done any more?
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. So, even just like a month ago, same thing, like the neighbor across the street from us, I've just slowly built this relationship with him and gotten to know him a little bit. And yeah, they had like this really tragic thing happen with their family. And I just was checking in on him because I knew something had gone on. So just wanted to see how he was doing. And suddenly, because there was this trust there, he just started to open up kind of his whole life and everything that's been going on, all the pain that they're going through and hurts and the needs that they had. So it's been cool. Sarah and I have been able to help them with groceries and kind of step in and just continue to check in on them and trying to see if there's ways that he could get involved here. And he's really interested in like looking out for more help and next steps. And so that's been a practical way to serve him and care for him.
It's incredible.
Yeah. And that was all just, again, because just afresh, I was like, okay, I need to continue to pray for these people by name. And as soon as I started praying, like, it's just amazing how the Lord's like, okay. And like, he'll open up those doors. Yeah.
And it's a good thing you were ready to go through the door when God opened it, right?
For sure.
And you asked for it. He gave you chances and you followed through. It's pretty great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing.
Yeah. Awesome opportunity.
Yeah, so that was really inspiring to hear. And I think that's encouraged me just to see God opening doors, not just in myself and you and some of our other team, but all across Parkway. So I think in the notes to this episode, we're going to give a link to where someone can join up with us as an everyday missionary. And again, let me just reinforce, there's no huge commitment to this. You're not saying I'm going to have a bunch of extra meetings or time commitments. You're just saying, I'm going to put B.L.E.S.S into practice in my life. And on top of that, here's what I'm promising, myself as the discipleship pastor, I'm going to give some regular, like monthly, I'm not going to be really spammy on this, but every few weeks, I'm going to give a nudge, just some encouragement, some reminders of how to be practicing B.L.E.S.S in your life. I might give some creative ideas or new tips to try just to help equip our people so that they feel confident to do this, that we're not on our own and that we're actually doing it together. But this will help point us towards that vision where we hope to see God raise up 300 or even more everyday missionaries, people that don't feel like I've got to give up the rest of my life to be on mission. I can do it right where I live, right where I work, right where I play. And it's not even just for mature adults, like our students can do this, our kids can do this. We can even talk about this as a family, how we're being on mission in our neighborhood or at school. It would just be really exciting for us to see more people of Parkway joining in and banding together on this.
Yeah, no, Scott, this is so good. And when I think about the potential of what's around this, I get so excited to think about it. When you think about the family here at Parkway and what God's building here in Greater Austin and beyond, to see people living out this lifestyle that we saw right in the book of Acts. When we look at Acts chapters 1 and 2, and specifically the believers that as they're coming together and they're praying and they're devoted to the apostles' teaching and they're blessing people, it says that he added to their number day by day those who are being saved. And man, I want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of seeing people day by day, those who are being saved. And we actually get to be a part of that. And we're seeing that happen here at Parkway.
That's so exciting.
Yeah, it's incredible. And so I just want to say thank you so much for your investment. It's so good to have you to be a part of this conversation and the fact that you live this out. This is a part of your life. And I just want to say thanks so much for joining us as a part of the Genuine Life podcast, because we really believe that these conversations are going to help cultivate in us this kind of lifestyle where we are actually putting it into practice. So I hope that you found this episode incredibly helpful, and I hope and pray that we will be a part of blessing people because we have been blessed in order to be a blessing. Can't wait to see you next month.